On today's show, Lyft tapping out of self-driving game for $550 million to Toyota.
Like the universe first expanded and it continues
Still
expanding,
is,
but eventually
yeah.
it's going to collapse.
You're saying that self-driving is imploding from inside. Is it over, or is there hope? We have very different opinions, so we're gonna duke it out. This is episode 27. We are at the 27 Club, and just shout out to everybody who's listening. I'm being a YouTuber guy, like, hey, thanks for subscribing, guys. But
smash that like button.
Smash that does non-existent like button. But our numbers gone up. Like, we get quite very steady traffic since earlier in the year, and they just like going up ever since. Opposite of self-driving cars future. And shout out to Nvidia for tweeting at us. Did it tweet us? I'm not on Twitter anymore, so everybody should know that.
They shouted us out, so you're shouting them back out.
Yeah, and hi to my dad. Why not?
Is yodeling still a thing? I'm
Mr.
yodeling out.
Mundeke.
And of course, joining as always, because you got ahead of me, I guess we'll start with you, Ben, is our reporter. Where's the Pikachu? I can't even see
That's
it.
over there.
It's
Do you know what? I was so tempted to move it today.
Oh, I saw two
But-
Pikachu. Okay.
You
I
said
mean,
we're
it
not doing a
could
show
move.
until today.
No, but
Not
Pikachu
doing it.
has to be mentioned.
That's Pikachu Watch, TM.
That's
Oh
right.
no, we'll get infringed.
Pikachu
Nintendo's
peak.
gonna get you.
Yeah. Okay. How are you, Ben?
Yeah, I'm alright. I'm over the moon. Handed in my master's work today, so crack it.
I'm great. And the man who's graduated from the School of Journalism and the School of Hard Knocks, our global editor, Max Molex.
Yeah, actually, both of us kind of like graduated with journalism degrees from the School of Hard Knocks. So yeah, I couldn't understand who you're talking about, but yes, hello, dear listener, it is me, Max.
And you're a little, and just so people understand, you're a little lightheaded. That's because
Have a problem.
you've done something last night, and that's kind of kept you.
Yeah. So last night, basically, I got into this kind of small-scale beer importing business, and they provided me with boxes of good stuff, and I kind of hit it a little bit hard. So I felt very, very bad today, until I had this beer. But now I feel better,
And that's not a joke.
and I don't have a problem.
Of course, joining as always, who just had his first coffee of 2021, the deputy editor of DCD, Sebastian A. Moss.
That's me. And, since the last episode, I've only cut myself 3 times with my new axe. So it's all going well. Still here. No tetanus.
Why don't we break into our marquee topic, Toyota acquiring Lyft self-driving unit for $550 million, which is a lot of money. And I think this is a good point for us to talk about not only that story, but just the overall look of autonomous driving. And if you remember, long-time listener of this show, remember that our sub-segment, Fast and Autonomous. So this is where
Trademark pending.
I'll cue in the music.
Except
for
it's not
Fast and
very
Autonomous. Fast and Autonomous. So Seth, tell us what's up with this story, and we'll zoom out into the autonomous vehicle's future.
Yeah, I mean, quick grounding on, like, if you don't know who Lyft are, mini Uber with mustaches.
Not as global as Uber.
They're not
US,
as big,
Canada.
they're not as global, they're just as nice to their employees who they don't class as employees. And they obviously got in on the self-driving hype back in the day because Uber got in the self-driving hype. Uber sold it off, we'll get to that later. Now Lyft is selling it off too. They've obviously had a difficult year because of people just aren't traveling as much, aren't going to out clubbing and so on, so there's really not much use. So they weren't making money when it was already a difficult game for them. So easy self, that makes sense. I think it's them realizing and the whole industry realizing that self-driving is many years off, and you can only be involved in one loss-making hyped up enterprise at a time. So them and the other ride-hailing guys are busy burning money on ride-hailing. Why also burn money on self-driving? So they've sold it. They're going to get a couple $100 million up front. The rest comes later, all dependent on certain clauses we don't know about. Instead, what they're pitching themselves at is as the end user for autonomous car companies. So companies like Toyota, like Mercedes, whoever, they don't want to be involved in the services side of thing necessarily. People aren't going to download a Mercedes app to buy a Mercedes or have a Mercedes self-driving car pick them up. Why not have Lyft be that end state? That's, on the one hand, it makes sense because then they can handle all of that and be vendor agnostic. But on the other hand, they don't need to exist, and those companies can say, well, why do we want to cut this extra guy in? It's like film studios don't want to cut Netflix in anymore. So Lyft Autonomous is the bit they're keeping. Level 5, annoyingly named because that's the type of self-driving, is the bit that's being sold to Toyota. And it's not going to Toyota Main, it's going to this new thing called Woven Planet Holdings, which is nice and cool in Japanese because the main thing of Woven Planet Holdings is the new Woven City, which is a whole city they want to build at the base of Mount Fuji, which is so beautifully cyberpunk. And when I say city, it's a town.
Is it a city? Yeah.
It's a town. It's right now it's a hamlet, but it's going to grow to 2,000 residents, most of whom are like Toyota employees. So it's a company town, and the idea is kind of Bioshock it, test out smart city things there, and part of that would be to test out self-driving. But again, just as Lyft is now going to work with these guys on their Lyft Autonomous and work with other car companies, Toyota are not exclusive to Lyft. They have their own kind of early self-driving tech that if you buy a Toyota car now, have very limited level 2 stuff. But then they have other partnerships. They partnered with SoftBank because everyone partners with SoftBank for a thing called Monet. They've got a thing with ARM, NVIDIA, Bosch, and a bunch of others to Autonomous Vehicle Computing Consortium. And then they're also partnering with Aurora and auto supplier Denso to develop robotaxis. So it's both of these companies are kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. But Lyft can't afford to pay for this because they're a small company that's losing money, whereas Toyota's the world's largest automobile manufacturer. What's 500 million?
Is this the first time the companies like Lyft and Uber realizing in the last 12 months or so that I guess self-driving is just not going to make money immediately and we need a cash daddy to bail us out?
But Uber's self-driving division was significantly bigger and lost Uber $500 million a year, which is obscene, especially because Uber was losing hundreds of millions on being
in
Uber.
other places.
Yeah. So when Uber had its very public, very hilarious change of CEOs, the new guy comes in, he's like, let me clean up shop, let me save us some money. And among those things, he first ramped down the self-driving division that had killed someone, and then he tried to sell it. Now, at the time when it sold last year, everyone's like, Uber got $4 billion out of selling this to Aurora. But they didn't bother reading the financials, which is actually, the deal is worth $4 billion. But what happened was Uber gave their division to Aurora and gave Aurora $400 million. And in return got 26% of Aurora. Which might be a good deal if Aurora ends up being the big self-driving company. But if Aurora ends up not winning, because potentially this is a winner-takes-all scenario, then they've just lost everything. And lost all that money they burned for ages.
Is it winner takes all though? So basically, so every technology, hyped up technology, goes through a period of like universal expansion, and then it starts to collapse under its own weight.
Here he goes.
And yes, consolidation happens, and consolidation is a very exciting time in the industry because people get acquired, and the kind of like the large players emerge, absorb all the smaller players, and we finally know who are the people who we can bet on to actually make this a reality, right? And you need to be a certain size to do that. So I always kind of maintained that the people who are actually going to make things like electric cars and self-driving really, viable are not going to be like the new style, kind of like Tesla style companies, but the old auto manufacturers like BMW or Volkswagen or like Vauxhall or like General Motors that have been doing this for a century. They've got the production facilities, and honestly, like they've played the game for such a bloody long time. As a startup, like what are you doing? What are you doing messing with these people? Seriously.
Obviously, we don't know the deal, like the ins and outs. There's no reason why 5 years down the line, when this technology is fully kind of implemented, that Lyft could secure a pretty hefty license from Toyota for a driverless Prius or something along those lines, where it's cheaper for them to have that license to have the vehicles than it is to actually develop themselves. And I completely agree with you.
Exactly. Yeah. There's easier way to get to the same end state than to trying to build your own car, or at least build your own sensor array,
Well, I mean, the real question is, what is the appetite of car manufacturers to get involved in the mobility space? So can they build technology, they can build cars. Yes, we know that. Can they build self-driving? Well, they're working on it. They're racing towards it. They will probably be good at the sensor side. The software side is, a current fight. Ford tried. They got really big on the mobility thing.
Yeah.
That was a whole the amount of pitches and advertising and stupid press conferences they've had. They've kind of walked that back now because they're like, oh, well, we prefer to sell everyone a car than sell one car that is shared between 20 people. And I think the appetite of those guys to be involved deeply in the mobility side is decreasing, and they would prefer to own a lot of the technology and then license it out, perhaps to Uber, perhaps to Lyft, perhaps to someone else. Most likely, I would imagine years from now, they will just have some kind of very antitrusty collaboration. So it will be an app that is controlled.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that it's just like it all coalesces around traditional vendors, because there are several companies whose names you need to know if you're following self-driving spares, who are the big whales, who are the guys who have whose gravity is large enough to kind of assemble the smaller guys. And those are, of course, Cruise.
Their big thing is they're a spin out, a semi-autonomous spin out of GM. So General Motors. So they've got the backing of an old school car company, but they're trying to be at arm's length so they can get money from other car companies and don't scare off too many they don't just become a division of GM. They've got, like you said, money from Walmart. They've also got money from Microsoft. They recently bought Voyage because, as you said, Max, we're seeing this consolidation of the industry. Their most interesting thing compared to some of the other people we're talking about, because they have that car company backing, they're building a self-driving car. And you're like, oh, well, everyone's building a self-driving car. No, pretty much all the rest are building cars and sticking self-driving features on top. So most of the others, they buy Toyota cars, they buy Fiat Chryslers, Waymo buys Fiat Chryslers, sticks on some LiDAR, some cameras, sends it out there. Cruise says, no, from the ground up, let's build a car that has no driver's seat. It's just a couch, 2 seats facing each other, self-driving focused. Very, very interesting. They ambitious, but they had a wobble during the pandemic. So when the pandemic first hit, Cruise panicked, laid off a bunch of people, cut back on costs. And then earlier this year, they're like, wait, we didn't need to do that because we weren't going to make money this year anyway. Why were we panicking? And they've started expanding again, bought Voyage, which were an interesting but significantly smaller company. So that's Cruise. Next one, like you said, Max, is Aurora. We mentioned them. They got famous for, they got a lot of news for buying Uber's division, but previously backed by Amazon, which always means Amazon knows its technology, so that's a good sign from them. Most interesting, it was founded by Chris Urmson, who was one of the co-founders of what turned into Waymo.
Well, Waymo is interesting because so what? It's owned by Google, but it got kind of it supposedly lost some of its technology to Uber, right? In a very, very famous court case that was if you listened to the Bad Cop podcast before, you've heard about Anthony Lewandowski and his company called Otto. Seb reminds me via the medium of text that they have two new CEOs.
So the interesting thing about the 2 new CEOs, so you had Josh Krafcik step down, and he was basically brought in to turn Waymo from just a fun project in Google into something more realistic, enterprisey. But his other thing was that he worked at Ford and Hyundai, so he was brought in to say, look, we're not competing with you car companies, don't worry, we're gonna augment what you do, because again, Google does not build a car itself. Waymo is the assumed front runner. They've been at this the longest. They've had the most money. They have all the computing power they need for simulating driving. But it's incredibly hard to ever accurately say who's the best because it's all closed, all secret. They've driven the most miles with the fewest accidents, but they choose where they drive. Some companies have been more aggressive driving in places with rain and snow.
Yandex, Russia's Yandex has been doing testing in Russia's winters.
Yeah, that's much more hardcore. I would say 10 miles in Moscow is far more impressive than 1,000 miles in sunny, safe San Francisco. So Waymo's always the one to beat, but the advantage they've had is because so many companies have been scared of Google doing what they did in mobile, which is the profits in mobile, if you're not Apple, are virtually zero. It's so difficult to play in that game. Car companies didn't want that to happen to them. They didn't want to be the next HTC. So Waymo forced car companies to spend money on self-driving long before they would have, because it's still so far off.
Don't poo-poo HTC. they didn't deserve it, gosh damn it.
So we've talked Apple. That's the dark horse so they have Project Titan. They recently acquired the remains of a small self-driving company called Drive.ai. But this is a project that Apple's a weird company because they have more money than God. So they can spend tons of money on projects, hire hundreds of people, and then be like, yeah, you know what? I can't be bothered. It's not worth it. And Project Titan has been kind of cancelled several times. People have left. There's been high turnover. Then it's been back on again. It's currently on, as far as we know. But the difficulty with Apple being a historically secretive company is most of the testing they're doing is secretive, and it's on pre-built tracks. And self-driving on testing tracks only gets you so far, because the whole issue is, how do we put a car in the real world without it killing people? Final company that I've got my eye on is Zoox. And I hadn't really heard that much of Zoox, I'll be honest. They were a bit of an also-ran. But then, last year, Amazon, the big daddy of taking over markets and dominating things, acquired them. We don't know for how much. They were kind of valued at around 3.2 billion a little before. It's thought that their valuation dipped a bit there because they were burning through money, and that's why they had to sell. The advantage Amazon has is they have a very obvious use case outside of ride-hailing, right? Delivery. They can have their delivery drivers driving Zoox trucks and training those Zoox trucks for as long as they want. And, they're buying a bunch of Rivian trucks. Rivian has a very limited self-driving functionality of its own, but they could put Zoox software on it, collect that data. They already collect most of the data if they're driving, and that can be used to train. That can be used to save money on deliveries.
So does that mean that Amazon are going to pay their workers less then, if they're not even driving the trucks?
Just no workers at all.
They're trying to pay them nothing. Yeah.
They're trying not to have any workers. That's an interesting thing, because I think what I'm failing to hear is actual use cases. I'm hearing the people spending money, and I'm like, okay, fine. I want you to experiment as much as you can, but even as a consumer, I don't see a use case yet, and there's no surprise they don't make any money, because nobody's going on. As much as Lyft want to tell you, going back to Lyft, they want to tell you, oh, by the way, if you go to Palo Alto, you can order. Don't you want to go on a self-driving car to pick you up from the airport? No, nobody wants that. Nobody wants to do that in Vegas either. I rather get in. The traffic is so bad. We just want to get to places quicker. And self-driving, driving a very slow pace and may or may not get in a car accident is nobody's ideal way of traveling on business. It should come as no surprise at all. And now we just dawn on us. Okay, self-driving doesn't make money right now. And it probably won't be for years to come, right?
See, okay, yes, but the problem is not user acceptance. That is not the problem here. The problem is that what happens on the road is still traditionally, it's in a backwards kind of like civilization that we are, is the purview of government. And the problem is it's regulation, because what happens on the roads, how fast you can drive, and how and in which configuration is defined by the state. And this is where we're getting into this very, very interesting situation where the car manufacturers are willing and able, and they're already building this tech out in there, but the governments are very, very slow to accept it. And something happened in this week. So our government indicated that they're gonna permit something called automated lane change assistance.
ALKS, yeah.
Lane keeping assistance. Sorry,
yeah,
it's not
ALKS.
about changing lanes, it's about staying in the same lane. And that's going to be available in slow-moving traffic. And this is, and they call that self-driving, which is a bit of a misnomer, because this is very, very basic functionality. And this is what we...
So this is not in your cars already?
No,
it might be in the car. The car might be able to do it, but you can't use it. I mean, it's technically illegal, but then if we're talking about breaking out lanes and also not real self-driving, that brings us to Tesla, right? Which is Tesla sells it as autopilot. It does a lot of things that might be illegal in different places, and it leads to deaths because it's not ready, and they don't use LiDAR like pretty much every other self-driving company. So that's why when we're talking about promising self-driving companies, I didn't talk about them. But if we're going to talk about regulations, they have to be mentioned because they flout them.
Because I think what we described just now is two very different things. The idea of having a really good self-driving car that we can control, that can go in and not do anything, versus a self-driving future where nobody owns car, but there's cars on the street and we just hop on and go to the places we want. That's like two very different scenarios. I don't know which one I want, and I don't know which one where these companies are going for, and I don't know which one makes money.
I think because self-driving is difficult, what you're going to have is areas before you have, like, I can do a cross-country trip with my self-driving car. You're going to have this inner city, this central city where it's very, very safe. They've manually mapped this, 50 square mile region. Then I can do self-driving here, and it can't go outside of that.
The one thing that strikes me is, obviously you say about the inner city, the city's being safe. The one thing that I kind of look at with this is you can't plan for every scenario. So in the UK today, when they were announcing the law changes, there's been some research groups pushing back saying, okay, what if someone walks into the middle of the motorway? Like, they're saying that he's still not that safe. And absolutely bonkers things happen all the time, no matter where you are in the world, be it in the UK or the US. And people, no matter if they're driving or not, do stupid stuff, and I don't think you can plan for those scenarios. So what happens if there's a load of cars and there's an act of urban terrorism? What if, how does it deal with different types of cattle? Well, a cattle can get spooked. I genuinely feel that we're focusing all on, can it change a lane? What happens if your car gets hit by a small duck? What happens if you end up hitting a tree, and you spill coffee on it? Like, there's so many stupid scenarios that they won't be able to plan for.
In a way, yeah, self-driving car is the ultimate goal because it's a machine that responds in a perfectly safe manner to external environments, right? And we've never built something like that as a human race. Like, we've never built a machine that is completely, responsive to its environments. This is where life forms are very good at adapting to external factors, and machines are not very good. So yeah, in a way, once we get there, we've kind of we've gained the level, we got somewhere else as a species.
No matter what, some consumers will still do stupid stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
When cruise control was a thing, people thought, okay, there was a couple of examples of people putting that on, ended up killing themselves because they thought it was autopilot. How many people died in Tesla crashes last year?
Too many.
No, genuinely, how many?
Go on.
2 or 3, right? Probably.
A few more, I think.
Yeah. Okay. That was
last year.
I died the other day.
Globally, 700 people were killed by toasters.
What? Toasters? Did you say toasters?
Yeah.
Yeah, but more people own toasters than own Teslas.
Okay, but what I'm trying to say, I'm just
suicide
trying to
by
make a
toaster?
humorous point.
You can talk about guns, and you're like, should we just ban cars in general? Because
Oh, God,
cars
it's
kill
the
more people.
Americans talking
No,
about
those are
guns.
two. Right, I'm just saying this is the typical. That thing kills more people. Should we ban that thing once and for all? It's like, no, that's
I'm
not
not
the
a
same
gun
conversation. We're talking about something that's very different.
Why are you making me out? Why are you making me out to be Marjorie Taylor Greene here? Come on.
No. The best.
I know the Earth is flat.
My question to everybody is, we've talked about self-driving quite a few times on this podcast, even though we've just been around not even a year. And we have different revelations throughout. Max, at one point, I believe he was doing a shower, epiphany came up, right? This is all true.
Oh my God, not the truckers again.
And you talk about, you suddenly realize that the autonomous vehicle is not for the consumers. It's actually for
the industry, yes.
And so there's different revelations. So I realized, I kept saying it's kind of a mess because every time I see a story, I'm like, I'm okay with that future. That's cool. Oh, that future looks cool too. But they don't align necessarily with each other. And they're just putting our imagination cap on and just playing hypothetical for a second. In 10 years, assuming we're still around on this earth and American cities is not underwater or under ashes, where do you see American roads be like? Are we talking about just a nice to have still, just a very souped up Tesla that we just kills less people than 179 total so far? Or are we talking about portions of the roads that say if I drive through a certain tunnel, I can go hands free, I can enjoy my cheeseburger,
this
allow
is a great
cheese to
question.
go over on my jeans, I can wipe it out without worry looking at the traffic ahead. Which future are we talking about? So let's go around. I would excuse myself from this question because I actually live in America. So, but I assume you've all been to America. You've all traveled to the roads that Eisenhower built famously to move military vehicles around the country. So where are we going?
It's 100% up geofence city centers where you can there is a central system that guides everything. So when you're kind of like, when you're giving over control, you're not just giving control over to your own car, but your car becomes a part of the sort of like city fabric, and there's somebody overseas that it interacts nicely with other cars, for example. And I think that's definitely going to happen because, like, for example, in London we have the sort of like the ultra low congestion zone, right, the ULEZ, and it's just like you need to pay quite a bit of money to drive into central London, and generally some roads have been pedestrianized. Other roads are there's calls for them to be pedestrianized, mostly like Oxford Street, which has some of the worst air quality in anywhere in Europe.
I think within 10 years you might have the more autonomous trucks, logistics lorries with delivery drivers in them helping and loading, but I don't see within 10 years consumer grade technologies fully adopted. I feel that the automobile industry moves quite slowly, and they're quite happy with how things are at the moment, really, because they're too busy dragging their heels moving to electric. They're too busy focused on that. And in all honesty, I feel that, consumers aren't ready for it yet.
I think we're going to see 3 different avenues for self-driving to happen. So there's the one Max was talking about, the industrial. So it's going to be a kind of closed factory lots and so on. And that's going to be a good proving ground for a lot of companies to test out this stuff. The second one, which is what you were talking about, Tien, which is highways, interstate. Now, interstate is obviously difficult because each state has its own regulatory framework. But that will be the more you buy a car, it has some driver assist, some level of driver autonomy, but you have to be at the wheel. And that will help you on these very long, boring straight roads in America, but you have to be touching the wheel, you have to have some kind of interaction. And then we get to cities. And the big problem with cities is we have an overpopulation crisis that is coming at the same time as decades of underinvestment in both infrastructure and public transport. So we see it in China now, you literally cannot give everyone a car. You're a New Yorker, it's really difficult to find a parking space in New York. That can't go on forever. So that's when the idea of shared ownership, or you don't own it, but you shared access of vehicles comes in. And companies like Uber and Lyft hate their pseudo-employees as it is. If they can then push regulators to allow them to fire those employees and replace them with robots, obviously it's in their incentive. So that's when we get those special areas. So I think driver assist outside cities, and within cities you get these special zones of self-driving, but it will still mainly be like a showroom. It will be a cool technology that you try out for a very long time, a cool thing, very limited, very slow, very careful. You can't go that far with it. Most of the time you just have to go with like a standard Uber driver.
I would say the other thing to look at is Asia. I think we can keep an eye on China because they spend so much money. They really the government works really closely with all those companies. And I interviewed a Qualcomm executive about self-driving 2 years ago in Hong Kong, and they're all very excited about it. And to me, I think that's cool. Somebody's really into technology and it's giving you all the free range of you can run and try new things on.
I'm glad you mentioned China because fear is a great motivator. Because yes, just right now there's a proposal going through Congress being attached to the China bill, saying like, guys, you need to extend the number of exceptions granted to self-driving cars, like by multiples of 10, 20, and it's just like, and the way they try to rationalize it is because China is pushing ahead, because in China they have no problems with regulation. They are free to develop like self-driving cars and robo taxis as they see fit.
And who was one of the big donors on the senators on that bill? Lyft.
Yeah.
It all comes full circle.
If you've been waiting for the final report of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence in the US. That is finally out. We haven't mentioned it, we don't have a story about it, but because, well, we missed it, to be honest. Like 20 days ago it came out, and it's just like, yeah, I apologize profusely. But if you want to check out the report, it's 750 pages of strategic national AI goodness. There's infographics, there's charts, there's an interactive version. Like, the thing is a thing of beauty, and if you want to understand sort of like what AI means to US national strategic interests, this is a very, very good place to start. We are hiring a reporter, so if you've listened to the podcast and you thought, like, you know, like, I could actually do this job better than they can, give me a call.
Then you probably could.
You probably could. Give me a call, write me an email. We are looking for people who are interested in covering technology, who perhaps have done it before, and who have interest in the specific field of AI. If that is you, my email is max@aibusiness.com.
Listen, if you have complaints about audio qualities, you're allowed to write to me. And by the way, stop linking to my Twitter, because I don't use Twitter anymore. You can link to my. How about you link to my LinkedIn?
Your Instagram.
Your Instagram. It's been a month.
It's Twitter for everyone. I think Twitter is the journalistic standard. Yeah, that's why I do it.
I'm not the journalist. I'm just a humble guy who I'm just a lion tamer who tames all the beasts together.
But you interviewed someone. You've interviewed Qualcomm. That's a journalist thing.
He interviewed so many people, actually. This is a bullshit claim. Yeah, because you are totally a journalist in addition to all the other duties. So, yeah,
And
get on
any
Twitter.
audio questions, I'm happy to answer at Tianqifu. And I guess you can find my Twitter or LinkedIn. The same handle goes my LinkedIn. You can find some nice professional stuff. Seb, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Tianqifu. You can also find me in my most recent magazine out now, TCT Magazine.
And Ben, our young and coming reporter, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Twitter, at Ben Wadecki, and you can find me obviously on the AIB website, writing all things news, autonomous vehicles.
Do you have to hit a quota, or do you just go? Do you just wake up and you chuck a Dr. Pepper, you just fire up some
whatever
articles?
I do, I literally go through my alerts, go through my wires, go through my emails, and Max gives me the Gladiator rules, and I just get on with it.
The Gladiator rules.
Do you get paid?
Oh yeah, I get paid, yeah,
Wow.
in buttons.